here in the good old US of A. We'll be back with the real news after the break. RealNewsRadio.com. We'll be back in minutes. Real News Radio. Your host Farron, co-host Brian. Ty's at the board, and we've got Jim at home. Hope everything's going good with the audio. I want to read an article from the Rock Creek Free Press. If anyone out there wants to get a hold of a real newspaper, please email us at onair@realnewsradio.com. I will put you in touch with where you can get a hold of a real newspaper with truth in it. But I'm going to read an article in here. It's on the, it's about torture, and as soon as I get done reading it, I'm going to give you my opinion on torture, and feel free to call in if you'd like to agree or disagree when we go to the phones. But this is written by Jacob Hornberger, and he is founder and president of the Future of Freedom. If President Bush and Vice President Cheney think that time is on their side with respect to crimes committed by their administration, this week's criminal conviction of former Peruvian President Alberto Fujimori should put those thoughts to rest. Returning to Peru in hope of returning to power, Fujimori was instead put on trial and convicted of crimes against humanity, including the killing of 25 people by military death squads. Meanwhile, a Spanish judge, Baltasar Garzon, has opened a criminal investigation of 6 former Bush officials: Alberto Gonzales, Douglas Feith, David Addington, John Yo, Jay Bybee, and William Haynes, for torture allegations arising out of the Pentagon's operations at Guantanamo. Garzon was the judge who secured a criminal indictment of former Chilean President Augusto Pinochet, which led to Spain's extradition request for Pinochet when he visited London. While the request was ultimately unsuccessful, Pinochet was detained in London for a year awaiting the final disposition of the request. Some might argue that a Spanish judge has no legitimate jurisdiction over crimes committed by U.S. officials in Cuba or elsewhere. However, U.S. officials are going to be hard put convincing people of that argument. Chucky Taylor, the son of former Liberian President Charles Taylor, has just been sentenced in U.S. District Court to serve 97 years in federal prison for torture crimes committed in Liberia. Thus, if the U.S. government has the power to prosecute, convict, and punish foreign officials for torture crimes committed in foreign countries, how likely is it that the Bush people will convince a Spanish court or any other foreign court that U.S. officials cannot be put on trial for committing torture crimes in Cuba or elsewhere? For many years, U.S. officials have endorsed the idea of an international criminal court for rulers who commit human rights crimes. Well, except for one big exception. U.S. officials always made it clear that the court would apply only to foreign rulers, not U.S. rulers. The rationale was that the United States was different from everywhere else. Here, public officials would not be able to escape justice for their crimes. What nonsense. Is there any effort by any U.S. attorney's office in the country to get a grand jury investigation into the torture allegations at Guantanamo, Bagram, Abu Ghraib, the CIA's black sites, or elsewhere? Is the Justice Department seeking the appointment of a special prosecutor or initiating its own criminal investigation? Of course not. And President Obama, the self-proclaimed agent of hope and change, has already signaled his position by proclaiming nothing will be gained by spending our time and energy laying blame for the past. Is it any wonder that so much of the world looks upon the U.S. government as a paragon of hypocrisy and double standards? How else can one look upon a regime that calls for an international criminal court for everyone else's rulers and immunity for its own rulers under the pretentious attitude, unlike others, we will prosecute and punish our own officials, and then when evidence of criminal wrongdoing surfaces, proclaims, let's put the past behind us and just move on? My hunch is that the Bush and his people will be excluding Europe from those speaking engagements that garnered them hundreds of thousands of dollars. They know what happened to Augusto Pinochet, but even sitting at home here in the United States for the rest of their lives might not be totally safe from prosecution in the long run. Just ask Alberto Fujimori, who just got sentenced to 25 years in jail for offenses committed some 15 years ago. And of course, if the Spanish government took part in rendition like the Bush administration and the Obama administration does, which means they can just kidnap you off the street and fly you to a black site, CIA secret prison and torture you, then they maybe wouldn't be safe on the streets of America. But here's the deal on torture. if you condone torture, which is against the Geneva Convention, which we are a signature, then when some Afghanistan or Pakistani troops, goat herders, be they what they are, capture some of our 18-year-old boys and they make videos waterboarding them or putting insects on them and doing the things we've done, then I want everyone to sit back that advocates torture and say, well, that's just fine. You know, we'll have to accept that, because since we condone that kind of activity, at some point we'll be getting it back. So that's my point on torture. I think what happened during the Bush administration is atrocious. He should be held in a criminal court and he should be convicted, just like we do all the rest of the people in the world. The United States of America has turned into the gigantic hypocrite of all time. So if you'd like to call in, you have anything you'd like to say about that, we're going to go to the phones here shortly. Any comments you'd like to make, Brian?
Condoleezza Rice, when the president approves it, it's not illegal. Yeah.
Wow, so we do have a king and a dictator.
Apparently so. This is from Raw Story yesterday. When Sanford University students recently asked former National Security Advisor and Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice about waterboarding and torture, her response uncannily close to Richard Nixon's infamous claim, when the president does it, that means it is not illegal. Students touting a video camera approached Rice and asked her about new Senate Intelligence Committee report which states that she gave the CIA its go-ahead for the use of waterboarding in July 2002. Rice responded by saying, quote, "The president instructed us that nothing we would do would be outside of our obligations, legal obligations under the Convention Against Torture." I didn't authorize anything, Rice insisted. I conveyed the authorization of the administration to the agency. By definition, she repeated, if it was authorized by the president, it did not violate our obligations under the Convention Against Torture. The video was caught by Young Turks radio host who blogged about it later Thursday. A violation of the law, he says, is of course a big deal, especially on something this grave and important. This is not a jaywalking ticket. There are 34 suspected or confirmed homicides of detainees, some clearly due to torture. It does not get any more serious than this. Then he added, the precedent does more damage than the law breaking itself because it sets a new boundaries and rules for our government. It confirms what Rice and Nixon argue for. When the president does it, which means it is not illegal, allowing that idea to stand unchallenged does far more damage to the republic than any one crime committed by any one person, even if that person is the president.
Yes, I mean, it's just unbelievable that the American people are sitting back and accepting this. We've got the Sean Hannity's of the world condoning torture, and that these people, to me, looks to me like the only thing they're guilty of is not liking us coming over there and overtaking their country. They're not trying to make, there's no evidence that these are well-armed, well-funded. Terrorist is not a standing army. It's a type of warfare. Just like when we send a drone and destroy Pakistani villages, that to me is terrorism. And you can't hold a gun on people and tell them to quit being, change the way your whole society is and be more like American. It incites hatred, and that's my point. So we're coming up on a break here in about 2 minutes, Brian. When we come back, we're going to take some phone calls. And again, our number, if you want to call in, this is the number you have to call in at. It's 1-866-986-6397. Again, 1-866-986-6397. We will be back with your phone calls after the break here on The Real News. Back on The Real News, and again, our phone number, if you'd like to call in, is 1-866-986-6397. And like I said, this broadcast is a forum for the listener. We want you to call in with your opinions. Agree or disagree, you're welcome to call in. And I think we have a call. We're going to go to the phones. Hey, are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, you're on The Real News. We welcome your comment. What would you like to say today?
Okay, thank you, sir. Wasn't there such a thing as all was fair in love and war? I mean, like, what happened to all Vietnam? Were they not torture? Was that not terrorism of some sort?
Apparently not if the U.S. government